Welcome to today's Google Hangout. We got a great lineup for you, but first we want to thank our sponsors, Tenkata Fabrics. Tenkata Fabrics makes firefighting safer by providing the material that go into most gear manufacturers' turnout gear. Tenkata has been with us from the beginning on this safety hangout, and today we got a great show for you. And once again, thanks to Tenkata. I have Chief of Operations from New Haven Fire Department, Mark Vendetto, here with us today. And Mark, you're going to introduce our very special guest.
Yeah, today we got a really good guest with us with a partnership with the New Haven Fire Department. I'd like to introduce Jerry Knisley from HYPACK Corporation. Jerry, say hello to the...
Hi, everybody. I'm Jerry with HYPACK. We're a software manufacturer. We work with underwater search and survey software. That's what we're going to discuss, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about marine safety. We're going to talk about sonar. Jerry, we thank him for his service. He was in the United States Navy as a submarine. And here we found a worldwide renowned expert resource kind of right here in our backyard to improve our marine operations. I want to start a little bit and talk about mapping, because one of the concerns we brought to Jerry when we first started this partnership is we wanted a way to grid not only the harbor, but the whole city. Chief Vendetto and I were working on how can we grid our target hazards to kind of hone in on where we want to go.
That's right, Frank. You and I were trying to come up with the system. We looked at like 7 target hazards in our city, and we were coming up with a plan to devise it and put our own grid system to it. And then, trying to get the training out there to our members. I reached out to the community, found Jerry. Jerry came in as an expert, and we started talking. We started talking about training our members in the sonar. And Jerry said, okay, great, we'll get the grid system together. And then Frank came along with it, and we started talked to another guy, and we came up with the FEMA grid system.
That's already out there. So here we are doing the typical thing fire departments do, trying to reinvent the wheel. So I'm at my neighbor's house, who happens to be a former Green Beret, and he goes, well, there's a civilian military grid system that FEMA recommends. So here's the military guy schooling me, who's supposed to be going around the country teaching. And I'm like, and so he gives me this printout, and it says FEMA recommends it because not only can you grid out on a GPS that's on your regular phone to increase safety, but you can also do it by a map, and that's what the USAR teams went. So we went back to Jerry, and we're talking about now of gridding out the harbor. And one of the most important things that you were explaining to us is that when we're doing our surveys with our sonar in the harbor is to be able to not only grid out your big grids, but also to come up with an isolated area. And the FEMA mapping system allows us to do that. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
All right, what it's actually called is the U.S. National Grid. And what happened is it's based on military reference grid. That's why your friend would understand what it was all about. With your GPS, you deal with latitude and longitude and coordinates. And what we had talked about was having different areas within New Haven. So when you call out marine search, one of the important things is to get the boat there as quickly as you can. Somebody's in the water, something's happened, you have an emergency, and you need to get to that site. So instead of calling out a latitude and longitude that somebody might not equate to, we had talked about saying, you have the piers, you have the wharf, you have the river, and you call them different parts of the grid. But instead, with the U.S. National Grid, this is something that's used by FEMA all across the country. There's different regions, and it's an actual, they're 1 kilometer squares, and they've gridded it. It's a standard mapping system that they use that works with GPS. It works without GPS. It's based on a reference coordinate. As long as you can find one of the reference coordinates, you measure within the kilometer grid where you want to be. So in New Haven, it's 18T LX specifies that area of the grid. And then within the grid, you have like 18T LX 7574 would be 7,500 meters north and 7,400 meters east of the reference point. So you can actually go to a grid coordinate, and everything references the lower left corner. And just like you did in math, when you had to do stuff in school on a grid, you started with a 0, 0 point, and everything went positive to the right and positive above it, right?
Right.
So in this coordinate system, it's scalable. So you can actually reference something to 7476, and you're actually referencing a 1 square kilometer to send a boat to, or to send a response to. Everyone go to 7476, and you know where you're at. Once you've identified a target and there's a sailboat, we went over and surveyed with your marine search, and you can actually drill it down even further. So 7420 or 742, 762 would be 100 kilometers or 100 meters instead of 1,000 meters. You go one step further and say 7462 and 7624, now you're down to 10 meters, a 10 meter square. Your target's within that 10 meter square. What's important about this is you can go all the way down to the meter. And when we're going to talking about putting a diver on a target, it's a hazardous environment. We want to get them as close as we can to the object. But if we get it somewhere within a 10 meter square or a 1 meter square, we're helping them get more localized. The U.S. National Grid in Katrina, I did a PowerPoint, and I sent it to you guys, but I actually increased it a little bit. During Hurricane Katrina, everyone came from all over the country, and FEMA came in, and all these people, resources came in, and they were given paper maps. Well, the paper maps weren't up to speed. They didn't have, some roads weren't even there. They found subdivisions that weren't even mapped on digital maps. So people went out with their cell phones and said, you know, we're going to go to this road, but that road was underwater. So you couldn't go up to the right and make a left or whatever road you wanted to turn on because the road didn't exist. So they kind of standardized. FEMA reviewed what happened during a couple of these natural, catastrophe storm type events and said, how can we do this? And it doesn't matter what happens during the event, but still reference a coordinate and make it something that we can use if GPS is not available. So they used the U.S. National Grid, which is based on the military reference grid, and it gives you the ability to always reference a point no matter what your source is, because 75,000 or 7,500 meters from the start point is always the same place. That makes sense?
And if you're just a high school kid like myself, where meters are like, wait, feet, it's very easy to convert. And the map lays out the numbers. Jerry's going to be writing an article about marine operations using sonar, which we've learned so much from him, and we're pumping him for more information. And we're also going to include a segment on mapping, because it's kind of amazing that a lot of first responders still don't know about this easy mapping system. And it's a way to work with your community partners. If you have a Coast Guard station, if you have a reserve unit or the National Guard, it's something that you can do a joint drill on. It also doesn't have to be just on the water. We have East Rock and West Rock, which is cliffs and a little bit of urban wilderness, if I could call it that. So it's a way to do some land navigation as well. So we're looking forward to doing some of those exercises and those drills. Now, one of the things that when we look at our harbor, to make it a little bit easier, is it possible when you lay out a grid of whatever the person's target hazard is, to actually say, put smaller boxes based off those mechanics in, say, a different color, say yellow, so that it would be easier for the lay person to just kind of pick it up a little quicker?
The U.S. National Grid is something outside of the company I work for. The company I work for, you can actually take this and drill it into whatever size we want. So on the map that you're working on, we can, so that the operator on the boat, 7476 is a 1 square kilometer. It's always going to be a 1 square kilometer. But let's say we were working around East Rock or somewhere over there, and there was something you can actually on the map draw a smaller grid base and show all the way down to the square meter or less, but you want to do it to the square meter on a map for somebody very easily. It's something that, one, is scalable to from a meter to 1,000 meters. You can, or a kilometer. You can do whatever you want with it at that location. The better part to it is, because it's a U.S. National Grid and it's meant for this type of event, it should be something that the Coast Guard has access to. FEMA, the federal government, has access to. If you're working an incident or an event and you're looking for somebody or doing some search and you go outside of your local area, other agencies can use the same U.S. National Grid and not have, New Haven Harbor. We talked about calling it Harbor Grid 1 and Harbor Grid 2. Without having to tell them where Harbor Grid 1 is, they can go to U.S. National Grid and know where 7372 is, because it started, it was a person in the waters. My experience is with the water, so we're going to discuss the water. If a person goes in a boat in one grid, they're not going to stay there. they're going to drift through the water. They may leave your jurisdiction to another one, and you're working with another agency. If you're both on the same grid, it's easy for you to say, we were here and we've already cleared this cell, right? In a search event, you're trying to find somebody and you're trying to find them as quickly as possible. Obviously, you want to do the fastest search you can. Well, we're searching 74, 75. The next agency could come in and move to the next cell.
And that's really important for me, Jer, because on the water, the resources are limited. So we have one 36-foot boat, and we got a smaller center console coming in, 18-foot boat. So you actually do got to work with other jurisdictions to really help you conduct these searches, especially out in the harbor and along the coastline. We're so close to communities that the water lines overlap. So it's really important that we have that understanding with each other, and it's a simple way for us to communicate with each other, our locations and areas that we need to look at. And
just recently, New Haven made a rescue in East Haven because their resource was down that night. And here we are operating in a different jurisdiction. You got to be able to communicate.
We had East Haven. We've been in West Haven, Milford. The lines are so close out there where you are working with the other agencies. And one thing we did discover was we had a little bit of trouble communicating who's searching what area right around. So we're hoping this helps us.
It should also help, though, with your diver situation. When you're going to put a diver in the water, one of the things with marine search and working with, we talk about searching. When I talk about searching, we're searching with a side scan.
Right.
You're doing a visual surface search, looking at the water, looking for somebody on the surface, but we're surveying with a side scan sonar, trying to see what's on the bottom. When we're out on the water and we're searching and we're looking for something, nothing is the object you're after until you've pulled it out of the water. We talked about this on the boat, and I kind of joke about it. A friend of mine always tells me, the guy that taught me side scan, it's a target. It's not what you think it is. So it's only a target. Until you pulled it out of the water, you can't say it really, it could look exactly like what you're after, but it's really not it. So you don't stop a search because you found a target. You found a target and you continue the search, but you could radio over to the police divers or the fire department divers, or say you're working with another agency. You could call them up and say, we have a target and it's at 74, 76. And then if they're using the U.S. National Grid, they can go dive that target without you having to sit on the target, them dive, and waste a lot of the search time, which frees your assets up to allow, if you have both boats working, allow both boats to keep searching, keep doing the work that they need to be doing, because if it's not what you were looking for, you don't want to lose that hour or more while the divers are in the water retrieving what you found. That
makes a lot of sense. And we are getting ready to team up with our local police department with their dive team, because this would be a joint effort with resources to get the most out of the unit to be a premier search and rescue team.
And you got to realize most state police dive teams and local police department dive teams, they don't have the resources to do everything. So they try to do everything, and then everything doesn't get done very well. So if you have a police department dive team, if the fire department can provide accurate and quality sonar interpretation, you're going to enhance that dive team to be more effective. And it also brings in that interagency cooperation, because in most places in the country, the police department can't declare somebody perished. That has to go through the fire department, through medical control. So it's going to be a joint operation anyway. And the person, we don't like to call people evidence, but once it's a recovery, the person is evidence. And there needs to be that working relationship and that respect for not only the person, but also for that evidence. So if you can find a way to maintain that investigation and help them. You were just telling us a story on the boat where a diver thought he was on the target, and explain that, where they were doing the sonar to kind of hone in. You could actually see where the diver was. And then
we went out on a search, and I assisted a local fire department that was searching for a person that had gone in the water. We identified a target and said, in my experience, this is the target that I think it is. This is 100% with the marine search software that HYPACK provides. We were using it on this particular vessel. I could map out exactly where the target was, show it to the diver before he went in the water. We have tools where you can measure the object. This is exactly the dimensions. This is the image. I brought it up on the screen, showed the diver what it was. Everyone concurred. This is something we should investigate. He went in the water before I was able to, with the fire department, anchor the boat. We actually went over to an area where we had an idea, okay, the diver's in the water. We didn't drop a buoy on the target because of the current. The diver went in the water, said he was on the object, and he called it out as a tree limb or a tree stump. There were trees in the area, and what we were looking at did not look like a tree. So we told the diver, lay down on top of the object, put your hand on it, and just lay sprawled out, you know, not spread eagle, but on the bottom. And we took our boat, because we were 20 feet above water, so it was a safe operation. Had the fire department dive boat north of us. We drove with the side scan past him and imaged where he was in relation to our object. And we could see him on the bottom. We could see the target on our screen, because within the marine search software that HYPACK provides, you can actually mark a target and it maps right there. You can call it up and you can drive right to it, throw a buoy on it, put a diver on it, whatever you'd like to do. In this case, he was laying on top of our target, and it turned out to not be what we were after. But it helped. One, it helped the diver because we were able to, within the software, show him the relation between the objects on the bottom. And two, it helped us because we knew once we went over him where he was.
So you can actually take the diver and tell him, hey, you're off the target. You're about 10 feet to the right to the target.
Yeah, if he had not been on our target, we imaged him on the bottom, I could have said, okay, now you need to move 10 feet starboard and 2 feet aft of where you're at, and you'll be on top of what we want.
And don't just think that you can buy a sonar and buy software and throw it in the water and you're going to be able to see things, because we found a sailboat that was known to be sunk there. And to me, on our old software, it looked like the Loch Ness Monster. And so now we recognize it through your software that it actually looks like a sailboat. You can see the shadow clearly. And even a lay person who looked at it could identify that as a sunken vessel.
Yeah, well, I would tell you, Frank, we tried so many times going out there, and you know, we'll play with the instruments, we'll watch a video and see if we can really figure out this side scan sonar. And you know, you need to be trained. Once you get the equipment, it's key to be trained on it. We went out there, we thought a few times our equipment may not be working. We brought Jerry in, he came in, he made some adjustments, told us what we were looking at, and then you start really seeing it. That's why it's really important to have these partnerships and getting the training. And Jerry's going to be getting our crew up to par.
So if you invest in buying side scan sonar, make sure you invest in the training component of it as well, because it's just an empty promise if you don't know how to properly use it. And just because you can put it in the water doesn't mean that you can properly use it. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, can I talk a little bit about the videos that you watched?
Sure.
Okay, so there's a gentleman out there, his name's Vince Capone, he's with Black Laser Learning,
Yes.
and he actually, he doesn't work with my company, but he does training videos.
Okay.
And he does a lot of training with the fire and police departments and with the Navy. They're really helpful, and
They are very helpful.
They got you far into understanding, once I got the sonar tuned in for you,
Right.
where you needed to be, where
Right.
it actually helped. You could see what I was talking about. So you were ahead of the game in understanding when I said, no, this is what we changed.
Right.
Even though you guys hadn't had the training on the specific sonar. HYPACK we do training and we do software. That's what my job is. So Black Laser Learning is a really good tool to get you. I've actually attended Vince's classes, and it helps me to understand sonar interpretation. If you've ever seen an ultrasound, it's the same technology. And you look at an ultrasound and it looks like an alien, and the lady says, no, that's your son. It's you know, she knows what she's looking at because she's done it. So I have a coworker that couldn't see anything. Never saw anything in a sonar image, where my boss, Harold, my supervisor, he can look at a sonar image and he can tell you a lot. I mean, he can pick a lot of stuff out of it. And this weekend, a friend of mine was in town that's taught me everything I know about side scans, that it's an art to understand it. You guys were seeing things, so you thought it was giving you the best image it could. That talks about the frequencies too, because on the hull-mounted sonar that you originally were using, it was a higher frequency, higher in the water with not as good of an image. Where the Klein sonar that you also own, put that in the water, we dropped it down, we went over that sailboat 5 or 6 times at different elevations, and you can see inside the sailboat in a couple of the images.
Yeah, always impressive.
And you can't be afraid to put the sonar in the water.
That's the one thing.
Tends to be a trend out there, right?
Yeah. One of the big things that a lot of people will do is they won't put it in the water because they're afraid of damaging the sonar. you're not going to get a good image because it's actually imaging with sound, and sound bounces off air and you won't see what's down there. If you're too high in the water, you're going to get a lot of turbulence. Your hull mounted sonar is between two jets and it's deep enough. We've tuned it and got it. So we're getting really good images with it.
And that would be great for us to do our initial scans, going over the areas. Like you said, we'll hit those initial scans. Then we can come back with the client, put it down in the water. And
that what we had talked about too is if you didn't have the client on the boat initially, is you got an incident, put the boat in the water, use the tools at hand and jump in and go start. Also, you do a lot of training. It's important to maintain proficiency with it because there's a high turnover in a lot of departments where you're not going to have the same people every time, or your best operator is not going to be on the boat. Don't be afraid to run out there and one day when you're doing training, take a square. You know, it's a square kilometer. Survey as much of as you can in an hour of training that you're doing. See what the bottom looks like and get acclimated to it. I can tell you Charleston, South Carolina doesn't look the same as New Haven Harbor when you're looking at a side scan because it's got some sand, some rocks. You might have a survey you do in one area, you get really nice images, and then another area it's sloped and you don't get as good of an image out of it.
So that's the plan we were talking about. Once we get the grid system up, we have the proper software, we'll get out there and we'll start searching those areas, and we'll get those pre-scans and we'll get them into the mapping system and into your program.
Right, and once it's in the program, what I would recommend, and I would recommend this to anybody, is if you have a 1 square kilometer, most incidents happen in 4 or 5 places. You know, the whole harbor is not going to be a high incident rate. You're going to have it where people are doing certain activities. If fishing near the jetties and you're anchored, that's probably an area you really want to get comfortable scanning. Not just so you see the bottom, but when we were at the jetties, that hummingbird that's on the hull mount, we couldn't really see anything because it's so high in the water. But it also was really rough, and I wouldn't put the client in just for the fun of it.
Right.
So you may want to get out there and survey areas that are high incident areas. 1, to learn what the bottom looks like, but 2, to learn how to operate the sonar in those conditions. You know, we get out to the jetties on a calm day and get a beautiful image of it, and the next time you go out there when you're looking for somebody, it's never going to be sunny and pretty.
Right. Things always happen at the worst time.
All right.
And with your software, you can compare what you looked at a month ago in that grid compared to what you're looking at now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I think that's important because when you were training us that day and we were just getting the baseline of it, you were able to snapshot even a picture of the bottom so that you could take it and store it so that you can compare what you have, but also put it in a PowerPoint and when you're training other people to see what's in their harbor. Because while Jerry's mapped the beaches of Normandy and been around the world from Egypt to Russia, the fact is we're not going out of the Long Island Sound. So the bottom's not really changing all that much except that they dredge or because of weather. So it should be comparable, and that should also help hone people's skills because they're looking for the same things.
Right. Even Middletown, the Middletown Fire Department down to where you guys are, it's going to be slightly different because they're working up in the 20 feet of water in the river, where we were at the sailboat, it was 12 feet of water. You know, there's a large difference in sand to rocks versus weather conditions and water conditions. And once you understand what you're looking for, it's helpful.
And one thing I know, when I was driving the boat, they couldn't see anything. And when the chief was driving the boat, you could see everything. So talk a little bit about your turning radius, because that's something that I wouldn't even have thought of at the time until we went through the training.
Well, yeah, it's important that all your crew's on the same page. So it went really well. You have to be, your coxswain has to be in tune, whoever is watching your side scan sonar. So when you go through the area, Jerry can even tell you this, that you don't want to disturb the water. So we kept our study target. We picked a spot in the land. I kept a straight line. But once we went through the area that we were actually looking to scan, we continued past it. We made our turn past it. And then we reapproached to let the water settle. Jerry, like you were saying, that the turbulence from the jet drives or even the props will create air in the water, which will affect your scan, correct?
Right. One of the things that side scan does is side scan is a noise and you're putting it in the water. So you're making the ping and you're listening for the returns. It returns off of a change in density, like air, fish, objects on the bottom, metals. So if you run through and you create the wake of a boat and turn around and go back through the same wake, you can't see anything. I did a survey once, and we went over a shipwreck and got a beautiful image, and they said, oh, let's go to the other side. But we drove right through our own wake and couldn't see anything. But it masks everything you're trying to do, and it's hard. You want to make sure, one, that the sonar is deep enough in the water, and two, that you don't drive through your own wake. By going past the object and turning around, you're going to get a better image.
Right, and you got to be careful. And you want to get different sides of the image too, right? We don't want to just approach it the same way. You want to come across it some different ways. Maybe you can touch on that with the shadowing of the images.
That's one of the things that we had talked about out there with the shipwreck or with the sailboat, is at different angles you see different things because you're looking into it from a different spot. You get a different perspective on it. Something might look exactly like somebody on the bottom. It's 6 feet long, looks like a person on the bottom. You're all set. And then you hit it from another angle, and it's really not 6 feet long. It's 3 feet long, but the shadow and the angle you were at made it elongate the target, make it look like what you were trying to find. One of the things with the marine search software, and we're going to talk about this a little bit, is when you mark the targets, it does what's called a real-time mosaic. And a real-time mosaic means that it takes all of the sonar images, and in real time, it maps it in its geographic location. So we're talking about doing it on the in the U.S. National Grid. By doing it in the U.S. National Grid, and say we're surveying just one grid, in real time, it's putting it on a chart so that I can go mark a target and immediately you can go to that coordinate instead of just looking at a sonar waterfall. That was something that with the Hummingbird, we could mark a target and get a coordinate off of it, but we couldn't with the system that you guys have. There's no way for us to interface to it and download those. Well, we can download the images, but we could not download the real-time scans to map it out the same way that we can with the Climb.
That we're going to be able to do now, integrate it in with HYPACK software.
Right. Now with the HYPACK software, we'll be able to do that with the other sonar, where we can actually, it's going to real-time fill in everywhere you've been. So we're going to overlay the U.S. National Grid on the chart in real time. Then we're going to survey inside that square down to whatever level of accuracy we want to get to. And when we're done with it, that square will actually contain a mapped out reference to where each object is. So for a diver, we could zoom in and say, there's 3 rocks here, and if you go just south of the 3 rocks or 10 feet to the left of them, you'll find the target. And it helps by having it in that mapped grid area.
That we can put them right into it.
And you got to remember that there have been plenty of line of duty deaths, unfortunately, from the police and fire department in diving. Diving is a low frequency, high risk operation. So anything that you can give that diver to make their dive safer, where they know the environment they're going to dive in, is going to make that entire operation safer. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think one of the things that it allows, there's 2 aspects to it. The first is it allows the diver in his mind to orient where things are at. If you're diving in clear water, and I learned how to scuba dive in Hawaii. It was beautiful. I could dive at the bottom and see everything in the world. If you're diving in the Connecticut River, 1, it's murky, muddy, you can't really see that far. 2, it's a high stress environment. You're diving in the water because somebody's in the water. 9 times out of 10, you're not diving for an oil drum. You're diving because there's something that you're trying to recover a body. So the stress level goes up. And the other part to it, it reduces your bottom time. If with the search that I did with the other fire department, when they put a diver on the water, they anchored the boat north of where my target was. And I think we dropped a buoy where we wanted them to anchor. They anchored there. And then the diver went to the bottom and he swept left to right in an arc and worked his way away from the boat down to where we thought the target was. This allowed him to avoid missing a target. But that also increased his bottom time. Had we not been able to go over there and say, okay, you're on our target, if the longer you're on the bottom, the more stress you're under because of the environment and the situation. If we can map it and we can provide the diver and the dive supervisor an idea, this is what you're down there for. This is what the target looks like, and these are hazards in the area. In my opinion, that reduces his anxiety of going in the water looking for something, not knowing what he's going to find.
And something that we see in the fire service, and I was guilty of it on another alarm, is that your special operations personnel tend to be trained in your side scan sonar. Can't talk today for some reason. So they're kind of squared away with about going in the wake and stuff. But everybody else who's on that river or in the ocean isn't on that same page. And that's where a strong unified command comes into play, because we were looking for a kayaker that was missing in the river, and Milford came in with their side scan sonar, and we had no knowledge of how Milford's sonar worked. And I know because I stole or commandeered a Boston whaler, and we were searching the shore. So I guarantee I was interrupting their scan without even realizing that we were impeding it, because I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the training, and here I wasn't a Marine guy at all, but we had a report of a kayaker who was yelling in the river. So we're doing our search, and they got the sonar out there, and we were probably messing up their sonar with no communication.
Well, that's where one of the things comes in with the search that I was involved with the other fire department. They had an expert come in, and they said, with the entry point of the water and the currents and everything, this is where the object that we were looking for, this is where you'll find it. And we jumped in the boat and we started surveying, and the first thing they wanted to do was go where that person had said, this is the pinpoint, which is great if you have that level of expertise. The problem with that is when you're out surveying, nothing's ever where you expect it to be. I did a search in Michigan. We weren't even searching. We were actually out driving around doing a calibration of multi-beam system. And to calibrate it, I wanted to go over a shipwreck that was a 1,000-foot long ship. And the guy said, I know right where it's at. I'm a dive captain. I take people there and we dive it. We were a mile away from his target when we actually covered it with the multi-beam sonar. He put his anchor in and drifted, and they were a mile away by the time they got to it. So nothing's ever where you actually think it's going to be. If you're going to search, plan your search, conduct your search. Even if you find the target of interest and you know what it is, send the dive team over, continue your search. Keep them away from your search area or other option, talking about interoperability with other agencies. The U.S. National Grid is going to get us there. The Marine Search software is going to help you. Let's say you're working in the harbor and you and East Haven are working together, and Milford comes over with their side scan. So I'm going to survey one cell, you survey another cell. Keep everyone out of your cell. Don't let, like happened with you guys, another boat's in there doing some survey work, but they don't have a clue because they don't have a sonar. You're an expert at it. You know what you're doing now. Let's keep everyone separate. But back on shore where the command center is, at the end of the day, if you haven't found your target, you can bring your survey data and another person's survey data in together and see the areas that are covered to avoid going back to an area you've already searched.
So you can get all that on a flash drive, put the flash drives together, the information, put it on the program, and actually come up with that mosaic of the area.
Blend them both together so that now we've got the whole search that we've done.
And that's what the difference is in your software as compared to just a regular, what you're getting off the actual sonar. Right.
Now you can get, there are other softwares out there, but our software gives you that ability to blend the things together very well.
That is phenomenal. I'd just like to take a second here to thank Tenkata Fabrics for sponsoring our show. They've been our sponsor from the very get-go. A lot of their fabrics are natural fabrics, which are naturally fire resistive. And again, no matter what PPE manufacturer you have, whether it's Globe or
Morning Pride,
or the chances are that's Tenkata fabric in it. So Tenkata does a great job at FDIC for us. Stop by their booth, and remember that they also have tools when buying PPE to do a risk assessment and to help you buy the best possible gear. Miles, can we get you back here for a second? Come in.
I know you guys are on the radio.
No, come on in. Come on in here.
I'll be back.
Okay, we're losing Miles. Miles is the former Green Beret who kind of brought us into this system, and I wanted him to speak to a couple things, but he's bailing out on us if, to use a ship term here. How many marine operations have we had this year in New Haven?
In New Haven alone this year, we had approximately anywhere from 20 to 23 actual calls for the Marine unit to go out. We've had a couple fatalities on the water. We've had some positive rescues this year. We've had probably about 6 or 7 people that we actually rescued out of the water just recently. We took 3 people off a vessel that was taken on water after they struck a rock. And their location wasn't remotely close to where they initially gave us. They were actually over in another town.
They were in another.
Yeah, it came in off our seawall, and then it turned out that they are actually out of the harbor and around the bend in a neighboring town.
So using this grid and using this sonar can really help, at least so we're not duplicating efforts of searching the same area over and over again.
In that particular case, they probably initially called in where the incident happened, and then they drifted. What's nice about it is, as you made the recovery, let's say the craft went down. if the boat went underwater.
Well, this one, Jerry, I mean, this one was just simply that pleasure boater out there that just really doesn't know the water.
Oh, that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, so.
But in this case, you made a recovery and it was out of your jurisdiction or out of your town. But at the same time, the after action report, I was in the military, and for me, it's always a lessons learned. At the end of every day, there's a lessons learned. What did you get out of today? So the after action report, well, we went to the point they said, we ended up recovering them at this location. You can use the U.S. National Grid in that case to say, this was our initial search point. This is how many meters or how many feet away. This is what we did for our grid search. Initially, you're at the point, so the Marine unit's in the water, and I'm sure there's somebody that you have to say, we're there, we don't see them, and you're reporting back and forth. We've cleared this cell, or we've cleared this grid, we're moving to the next one. And this is eventually we got to where we were at. It's a good way for after-action reporting. In our case, what I was going to say is about the sonars. Let's say the boat had sank, and you recovered the personnel in the water, but now you need to locate the boat. You could use the sonar at that point. We recovered the people at this location, and here's a sonar image of the sunken vessel, and this is its location in the U.S. National Grid to bring it back.
Right, and that's key too, because another one of our rescues we had, someone struck one of our navigational aids, and it was critically injured. But actually, where they were recovered from where we actually found the boat afterwards was in a totally different area due to the currents taking the boat to a different area. So, like Jerry said, the accident occurred quite some distance away, probably over 1,000 yards away from where we actually located the actual boat after the call.
So you find that quite common?
Yeah, especially on the water. When you're working with the water, things are going to move around. It's a constantly flowing system. It's very rarely something bad happens on a very calm day, unless it's dark out or you have, most of the time it's going to be in a dynamic situation where things are going to move. It's nice to have that reference point. We cleared these areas. This is what our reference was. I'm sure that when you guys do an after-action report or you do your reporting, you have to specify in any accident, this is where it happened. This was so many yards away. This is the coordinate of this, and this is, for evidentiary purposes. Especially working with, like you said, if somebody's in the water, they become evidence for the police. This is what happened, and this is where this occurred. The distance from this object. It's a lot easier to do that when you have a good reference.
This is what's great about doing this in the backyard. You can grab the neighbors as they walk by. Miles, come here for a second, because we kind of introduced you when you weren't here. But Miles was the one who kind of enlightened me when I was trying to recreate the wheel here. One of the things that he brought up that we didn't consider, and we had it in New Haven, and it wasn't an individual that was sunk. They were on the side of the river, and they were calling for help on their cell phone. And so using the grid system, can you explain that, how you can access your location on most cell phones?
Yeah, it's actually when when Frank and I were talking about doing the grids, he's doing his own grid search, we started talking about what we use in the military, which is MGRS. And doing a little bit more research, then I found out it was the U.S. national standard, which I didn't realize, which so corresponds to MGRS, which also helps your interoperability with the military, getting aircraft, because a lot of National Guard units are participating in search and rescue. So other than that, with everybody having a cell phone on them today, I started doing a little research, and even Google Maps, which everybody pretty much uses for the GPS. If you just press your finger on it, it'll give you a lat long or some form of location. But the nice thing about it is if you have contact with, I know you had somebody that fell in the river or something, and you had a cell phone.
The cell phone, it's still working.
Yeah, it's still working.
If you could just tell them that, just you have Google Maps, most people do, and you tested it on your cell phone too, so it's Apple or Android. If they press the button, they could just type in a phone number, and they'll send you their location. You can have it with any firefighter. So that's something we'll do a little bit more with.
So it can get text right to the firefighter. So when Jerry writes his article, we'll put that in there for the different phones, the Apple, the Android. But that could have been very helpful, because one of the things our crews were doing, tell them what they were telling the guy to do.
Well, the basic, typical things that you always do. Can he describe anything that's near him? Give us some kind of object on land. Then the next thing, obviously, was, can he see our lights? How far are we from him? Those were the ways we actually got to him. Then we actually had him call out, and that's how we narrowed down to exactly where he was. That takes some time, when the technology could be right there at his fingertip.
So we could use that in the water. We could use it at West Rock, East Rock. Somebody's calling for help. I'm in the woods. it almost seems like common sense, but it's something that we're not so used to using. So think about that out there. Somebody's on the phone, go into the maps, turn in their GPS, and simply give us a location, text it.
They give you the location like you're talking about. If they give you the latitude and longitude, right in the marine search software, you hit a button, you mark a target, type in the latitude and longitude, and it pops up on the map. So when you're looking at the screen of the software, you could drive direct. You don't, okay, send me your coordinate and drive right to that coordinate.
So they make it almost firefighter proof.
That's what we're trying.
That's very important.
And then that will correspond to the U.S. national grid.
And then we can map it on the national grid, because once it's a latitude and longitude, we just grid it to that point.
That's remarkable. And it's something so simple. We get all of our best guys were on the phone saying, look for the emergency lights, look for, can you see the bridge? Well, you can see the bridge anywhere in the harbor, whether you're in the ocean or in the harbor, you can see the bridge. And wow, it's a distinct honor that we have another guest on,
Bobby,
the boss of all bosses, Bobby Halton. Please join in.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt. I've been listening. I think you guys are spot on. I agree. I think that the grid and technology need to come together. An 80-year-old grid in many parts of the country, sometimes a 200-year-old grid for you guys in the Northeast. So, cowpath roads and all that goes with it, we're kind of translated into that. Hey, the only reason I want to jump in real quick is kind of a point of personal privilege, if you don't mind. And I am working out at the moment, and I'm doing so intentionally on my lunch hour here at the Halton Manor. And so here's the reason why I look like Father Christmas. I feel like, remember Tim Allen in the Santa Claus? I feel like Tim Allen in the Santa Claus with this 3-day shadow I have on my face. And the reason I'm doing it, and the reason I jumped in real quick, was I'm participating in Movember. And I was challenged by HSC 3, Lieutenant Commander Dean Drama Halton, to participate. And so I took that little weasel up on it. And I'm going to grow facial hair, which I hate. I hate facial hair. I despise facial hair. But I think men's health is a huge issue. And so I just want to ask you folks, because I know how connected you are, to kind of join me and participate. And sorry for the interruption, but it matters. And my point is that old Ben Franklin told us an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if you can't see your toes when you're putting on your trousers, and if you have to take a deep breath like Frank to button your dress blues, just kidding. But we did have to put a warning to the people in the front row when he spoke, because, if the buttons come off, it'd be like a 22. So I'm just kidding. So, we can't, the first person we should always hold accountable is ourselves. So kind of a a wellness call, and an opportunity to help firefighters, cops, all the first responders through the Movember Foundation, whether it's mental health or wellness or all that good stuff. So I just want to say hi and thank you to Frank and PJ and Justin and everybody that you interact with out there to produce this incredible hangout. And of course, always deeply grateful to our incredible sponsor for their support, and don't know how we would do this without them. They're such incredible people. So just a shameless plug, and I love you, and that's it. Sorry, I'll go away.
We're all on the elliptical right now, and none of us are out of breath. So, but we encourage you to grow a mustache and support charity however you can. And our thoughts are always with your son. Bobby's son was at the Vegas concert and led people out over a wall to safety. So we're glad your son's safe. He comes back from Afghanistan and yet is in a dangerous situation. And it looks like he's going to be getting a command in the Navy in the future. Would you like to speak to that? Because I know you're very proud. I am too. I was glad that you shared the news. Jerry was on a submarine for how many years? 9 years. And Miles been in the military his whole life, and we won't let him get out of it because he's still teaching us and helping first responders. So if you could speak to your son real quick, we're all interested in the latest update.
Yeah, what's great about the Navy, as you guys know, and obviously from being a submariner, the process for command is diligently adhered to from the first day you arrive till the day you leave. And that growth and maturation and everything that goes with it is highly monitored, scrutinized, weighted, adjusted, improved, reinforced. And so my son just cleared his oral boards for command. The Commodore gave him the thumbs up that he's fit for command, and now he's put into the queue along with other lieutenant commanders for command rank and command assignment, wherever that may be. So we're grateful to the Navy, and he's grateful to the Navy, and it's going to be pretty cool when it happens. And I think I might mention it like a million times to the entire world. So thanks, Frank, for bringing that up. And thank you, United States Navy, for what you do for the defense of this incredible nation, its principles, values, and honor.
Bobby, one of the things that Jerry did that I find quite fascinating is he actually mapped the beaches of Normandy, and he's also working actively over the years with the Marines on their beach landings for sonar.
We did a training with the Marine Corps a couple summers ago. I mapped the beaches of Normandy. I was part of a group that did that.
We're the fire department. We never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Sorry. Too many facts there, Jerry. There's a great story I'm sure Jerry is familiar with that has to do with the Army during the invasion of Normandy, and that story is almost, I think, captured most vividly in the story of a private who was nicknamed Jumpin' Joe Byerly, and Joe was a paratrooper, and he was really good at it, and this kid at 19 was dropped twice behind enemy lines, and with gold in his belt to deliver to the French resistance. I mean, and this is just a run-of-the-mill farm kid from Nowhereville, and he was successful, right? And then after doing that twice, he was dropped into D-Day along with the rest of, I believe it was the 82nd, who were estimated before the war by Eisenhower to lose 7 to 8 out of 10 of the jumpers. Now, they only lost 3, only. Imagine that. Every third guy, right? So, roughly. So, anyway, Byerly was captured twice that same day. Got captured, escaped, got captured. Spent the war in prison camps, escaping and getting caught and doing all kinds of stuff. They beat him so bad he ended up with permanent brain damage. But on his last escape, he got away and joined the Russians. So he's the only American soldier to have fought in World War II with both the United States Army and the Russian Army. And he actually participated in the liberation of the very prisoner of war camp that he last escaped from. So neat story about World War II and D-Day. And, you know, man, I'll tell you, you gotta love the stories of the United States military. If you want to read another really great story, it's called I'm Staying with the Boys. It's the story, sorry about that. It's the story of, I want to make sure I get it right, of Marine Corps Sergeant from Guadalcanal. I mean, his name's eluding me, Bastogne, Sergeant Bastogne, and he received the Congressional Medal of Honor, came back to the States for his actions on Guadalcanal, insisted on returning, and was killed at Iwo Jima. And his story is amazing. And it's called I'm Staying with the Boys. You know, so.
This guy I mentioned came into town, his name is Ralph Holbrook. He's the one who taught me everything I know about track stands. And Andy Sherrill, who's the gentleman who got me involved with the Normandy survey. So the three of us were having lunch, and one of the things that stuck with me about Normandy is we hear nowadays about the 4 soldiers that were killed in Nigeria and you hear about another friend of mine whose son was killed in Iraq in a helicopter crash, lost 46 people. In gearing up for Normandy, they invaded England. They practiced the beach landings. In one weekend, they lost 700 American troops. Training. Wow. There were 700 people that died, and their families weren't notified because they couldn't say
what they were doing.
Your family was killed, your family member died practicing because they hadn't yet invaded France. 700 people killed.
Well, please continue your discussion. I think it's amazing. I truly do love you all. My battery is dying, so I don't want to appear rude and just disappear. But I'm so grateful to all of you, and please keep going. Remember, the Honeywell Scholarship is open, and please submit your folks for that incredible event. If you want to see Frank in person, he's actually much taller and prettier in person, and he has hair. He really has hair. That's a thing he does to make himself look older. So just tease him. So hey, I love you. Thank you so much for letting me jump in and say hi and take a look at Movember. I'm going to be forming a team. It'll be Team Ricci because he's got a much more powerful name than I do, and we'll take on Movember.
We usually do that with the union.
Yeah, the union does it every year in New Haven, so they're out, guys, throwing their mustache now. Everybody looked like they needed a cat to lick it off yesterday at the golf tournament. I was like, "What is going on?" They're like, "Oh, we're all."
I told my
mustaches. So,
I told my son, the commander, I said, Lieutenant Commander, I said, "I'm cheating. I already started." He said, "Dad, you're a firefighter. I expect you to cheat."
Well, Bobby, thank you very much, and have a good day and enjoy the rest of your workout. And we're honored that you came on our show today.
I love you. God bless, and we'll see you down the road. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And just real quick, Chief Holland was talking briefly about the Honeywell Scholarship. That provides a firefighter a trip to FDIC, the fire department's premier instructor conference, where over 30 to 35,000 firefighters from the English and Spanish-speaking world, even people from Russia, attend classes there now. I mean, it's quite remarkable.
I would have to tell you, last year was my first year ever attending. Frank got me to come, and I have to tell you, it was a great thing to partake in. It is something really to see and do. If you have to do it at least once.
So we really thank Honeywell for sponsoring firefighters, because we all know the budget crisis that's out there across the country, and sometimes it's tough to send individuals for training. But it's not only the place to get training, but it's also the place to meet manufacturers, like to go to Tincada's booth, to go speak to people who have that sonar experience and that can kind of give you that niche and point you in that right direction. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, Jerry, can you give them a website? Because we really appreciate all you're doing for firefighters and what you're doing for New Haven, because we're under the leadership of Chief Alston and Chief of Operations Mark Vendetto. And with your tutelage, I think that New Haven's going to be the premier Marine unit in the state of Connecticut. How can somebody reach out to you?
Okay, so the website for us is HYPACK.com, and it's HYPACK.com. And there's a whole bunch of things there that we do, primarily hydrographic survey work. One of the products and what benefits you guys is the marine search product that we're working with, that we've teamed up to make sure you guys have the training and necessary tools. So I think it's November 8th or 9th. We're going to do my podcast, or marine. We have a webinar that my company is going to put on to discuss specifically marine search for fire departments and to discuss what we've actually worked together to achieve. HYPACK.com, I've been with the company for 20 years. We're a product of Xylem now. It's a company that really is concerned with water and water resources. We're a small part of a large corporation in that respect.
Well, we're going to be trying to get them out to FDIC and kind of broaden their signature and their footprint in the fire service, because fire engineering, FDIC, Fire Rescue Magazine, and Fire Apparatus are the places where firefighters come to learn and to learn about new manufacturers. Jerry's going to be co-authoring an article with us about safe marine operations and search and sonar. And sonar is more about than just buying that apparatus. You got to get out, you got to train on it. Something that I'd like the chief to speak to real quick, because we only got a couple more minutes left here, is we found, even with the jet drive boat, that there's a certain place that you have to put the sonar so that when you turn, you don't get the sonar underneath the boat. And then maybe you could talk about the prop part of that.
Yeah, and what's
I think that's important.
So it's key. Department goes down, like Jerry was saying, you know, this thing costs you $40,000, $50,000. You certainly don't want to lose it getting cut off by a prop and dropping it down. Call it your dive team to go find the find your side scan sonar. I wouldn't want to be the marine operator that had to call the chief of the department and said, just put 50,000 on the bottom of the ocean out here. So you got to be very careful. Jerry and I, we came up with a great plan. We used our davit. We put it off on our port side, and really went well where we tied it up, Jerry.
Yeah, it worked really well. With the davit on the port side, we were able to lower the sonar into the water. You always turn towards the sonar when it's in the water, never turn away from it. We had the situation, we turned a little bit, and
we won't say
I won't say who was driving, but we sucked the sonar right up underneath the boat, and we were able to recover it without any damage, without any problem. So if your bosses are watching, you know,
we love it when
it's safe. It was okay. The gentleman that was speaking a second ago alluded to, you know, being prepared, and I had a chief in the Navy that always told me, prior preparation prevents problems. Prior preparation prevents problems. If you prepare and practice, people, a friend of mine was in the Army, and they always said, train like you fight and fight like you train. Always go out there and prepare yourself. Things won't go perfectly ever. There's always going to be something that goes wrong. Practice. Like we did, we figured out the great way to deploy the sonar, and we did multiple passes over the object at different elevations to give us a better idea of what we were looking at, to give us the idea of how it works the best.
That's right. Now we're going to develop the plan. We're going to get the rest of our Marine unit trained and up and running with this. And it really just goes to see when you reach out just 20 minutes away, we had an expert that's going to help us to get together and get our sonar program up and running, get us going.
And for some chief officers that are watching that aren't part of their Marine unit, the davit is just the crane.
Yeah, it's a crane hanging off the side of the boat that allowed us to easily control the depth of the sonar in the water and how we had it paid out.
Right, the weight of it too. It was nice just to put it right over the side.
The biggest thing is we talk about safety, and you know, you always want to make sure that everyone's safe in every operation. With this, we talk about it being a high stress environment. The sonar weighs 20, 25 pounds maybe. You pick it up and you hang it over the side, but then you lower it. We're 6 or 7 feet off the water on your marine boat, so I'd have to really be careful dropping it over the side. But with the davit, we were able to control the weight of it. We want to pay it out a little bit more. We did a couple clicks on the handle on it with the come along. It was able to lower it, raise it however we wanted. It's a nice way to deploy this sonar.
Well, this puts us at the end of our show. I'd really like to thank Jerry. I'd like to thank Humper the Whale from HYPACK, your mascot. I got the t-shirt. Thank Fire Engineering, of course, Tincada for sponsoring this Google Hangout. My neighbor, Miles the Donut. Again, firefighters, guys, we got to reach out past the fire department, guys and women in the fire service. You know, we almost sometimes get too closed in. We need to reach out to the police. Here, I'm trying to reinvent the wheel with Chief Vendetto on a grid system.
And it was already there.
I happened to go steal a beer from my neighbor and learned about an entire new process that's going to change the way we grid out our harbor. And I think it's going to make us more effective, more efficient, and really help with interoperability with working with people and ensure a more quality search to ensure we're not duplicating efforts. And with this sonar from your company and the software, we think we can really improve our marine operations. So for Fire Engineering and on behalf of Mark and myself, thanks everybody from tuning in today, and hopefully we'll see you back here next month.
Have a good day.
Thanks.